Hello, I'm Rachel
And I'm Dwayne.
from Travel by the Book TV. We are in San Francisco, California today, in a little teeny tiny street called Clementina, to visit the American Bookbinders Museum. And we are about to go in and check out what American bookbinders are doing. Anita, tell us about the museum.
So we tell the story of the book, and we focus on the physical object. We walk you through the hand binding process. The process that we show you is from the 1600s. It's the process that came to this country. It's the tradition that we inherited. By that time, by the 1600s, it was a very mature and well-evolved process. It really doesn't change from that period of time until it becomes industrialized. And that's the second half of what we show you in the museum, is that early industrialization, or being able to mass produce books using machines and automating the process.
You put the talcum powder between each page. I think I would go insane if I were a bookbinder.
So our mission is to preserve the history of bookbinding, that culture of bookbinding, and the machines and tools of bookbinding. There's a lot of technology in making a book. We find that people come and people come here because they love books, right? Or they love history, or they love technology.
Once the edges were trimmed and protected, if you could afford it, then they would continue doing the binding process with the covers, which is not the term you're supposed to use, with the boards. So they would take the edges that you would leave on once you sewed the spine. I'm gonna get these terms wrong. And you leave those on, you don't trim those, because then once you put the board on, you're able to take it and attach the board with those papers. And this one is really great because it glues them down. See, there's another example of that. And then here, so right there's the rounding of the spine to take the stress off of the stitching. But these ridges right here, that's where the stitching goes. There.
So those little ridges on the spine of a book were there for a reason.
Yes.
I just always presumed they were decorative.
Me too. So from start to finish, how long would it take to, first of all, hand make a book and then manufacture a book like this?
Right.
Which I guess is still hand done.
A hand-bound book, you would have to expect at least 2 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty quick.
But it's, one at a time.
Okay.
So you buy your book and you take it to the bookbinder and you say, please bind this, and he or she, but probably he, would say, come back in 2 weeks. Or, see, it depends on how much decoration you want, right? So if you want a really, finely decorated, this is relatively simple. This is just the spine. But if you want the cover decorated, this would have been hand tooled. Well, that's going to take time, so that's going to take longer, because this is really fine detailed work, so it's really going to take a lot of time. So the answer is really, it kind of depends on what you can afford and what your tastes are.
And how much would, let's say, in today's money, would a book cost?
Books were very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And, most people couldn't afford books. Really, only rich people could afford books. Rich people and the clergy. A book would be like a car. It's like buying a car, right?
Wow.
So your average person couldn't afford a book. For an average person to have a book, that was a very big deal.
Wow.
Now, the other thing is you have to remember that most of them could not read.
Right.
There was very high illiteracy.
Wow.
You didn't have any need for a book because you couldn't read it anyway.
Right. In order to come up with a cheap way to bind pamphlets and popular material quickly and easily, I would like to introduce you to the first stapler, which used an actual a spool of wire. But if you look down here,
Oh yeah, it's essentially a stapler.
And so the publishers, the manufacturers are saying, how do I reduce the cost of books. And so you reduce the cost of the materials and the cost of labor, and then you can sell the books for cheaper. So you can mass produce books, everybody can afford them and buy them and read them.
If you could read.
But by this time, by the 19th century, you have a huge increase in literacy, right?
And does that come along because of the more availability of books or because of social pressures to increase literacy?
I can only really speak about this country. So in this country, that was a social pressure. Reading was just sort of part of being American. You know, when the first Puritans came here, you had to read the scriptures to be close to God. That was just part of their belief system, whereas that wasn't part of the belief system that they left behind. So there was always a very big push in this country that people should read. Everybody should be able to read. The very first free public school was in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And then after the Revolution, free public education became a part of our country. So people could learn how to read. And it was important to people to be able to read. So then there was the thirst for affordable books. But also just affordable things to read, like the ephemeral stuff, the pamphlets and things like that. Mm-hmm. So there was a huge market in that, you know, broadsheets and things like that, that people could purchase cheaply, read them quickly, and throw them away.
So once you have finished viewing all the exhibits in the museum, which are very well labeled and explained, I have to say, you can come to the back of the museum to the touching parts. You can come back to the back of the museum to the folding station or to the sewing station, where you can decide whether or not you should become a bookbinder.
So I looked at the one and I sort of practiced. I think I have to do it this way. So I'm looking for the A, and then I have to make the A2 next to it. So I think I just do this. This way.
You know, if you were in a guild, it would take 7 years to learn how to do all of this. So
Then I have A, and this tells me that not has to be the first page, the first word on the next page. And it is.
It's not?
It is not. And then here's a 4, and that says fifth. Needs to be the first. There's fifth. So then they would fold that, and they'd put it in, and they'd sew it here. And then they cut it here, and cut it here, and they have a lovely book.
Dwayne folded the pages. Once the pages are folded, then you take your text, your signature, they're called, and you line them up to the pieces that are already here as a G, essentially. And now I need to sew them. So I'm sewing it into the first hole, and then run thread along the inside of the fold until you come to the, okay, let's just make sure that that's what everybody else did. Is there, okay. All right, I got this. So then stick it in here and you go a loop-de-loop. How do they do this and keep it so tight is the question. I guess after you do it a million times, you get really good. I feel like I'm at camp again. I did not snug it up very well. All right, so I sewed my very first signature.
What's a signature?
Signature is a folded piece of paper. I think I'm right. And then I sewed it into what will eventually become the text of the book, which is the block of signatures together. Okay, so while we were chatting before off camera, you mentioned something about throw up. Please tell us about that.
Throw up is an important term in how books are bound. So there's two kinds of people who produce books. There's the people who produce books that you read. Those are publishers. Those books are only meant to be read. And then there was the stationery binders who made the books of business. And books of business are meant to be written in. So they need to lie flat, you know, because you're working, here's your ledger, and you're going to write through that binding, through the spine. It needs to be relatively flat so that you can write. The amount that the paper goes up is called throw up, right? So this has little to no throw up. If you look over here, this is a published book. You see how you have the curve? That's throw up.
There's a lot of throw up on that book.
Yeah.
I know I'm gross, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah, Rachel's 12. Yeah.
We're a nonprofit, 501c3. We exist because of private donations. We accept cash donations, obviously, and those are really important to keeping us going. But we also accept in-kind donations. So a lot of the equipment that you see was donated to us, you know, from retiring bookbinders or, you know, other sources that wanted the equipment to be maintained and preserved for history for future generations.
One last question. Are you a bookbinder?
I am not a bookbinder.
Fraud.
I run a museum. I am not a bookbinder. I have bound one book. I thought I should.
That's one
at
more than I've
least
done. So
bind one
you are a
book,
bookbinder.
and it's a process. It's very careful work. It takes patience.
What book did you choose to bind, or did you?
It's just
do
a
blank?
journal. It's just a blank journal. So
How much throw up does your book?
a lot. A lot.
It was just very interesting to learn about something that is so commonplace, and see the mechanics and the things that you don't see because of all the nice finishing and everything.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that.
Good. I'm glad
So
you
thank
enjoyed
you
it.
for this opportunity.
Thank you for coming.
And
I
please
enjoyed it.
come and visit the American Bookbinding Museum because it's pretty awesome.